The alert sounded across Station Gamma 12, its shrill tone cutting through the usual quiet hum of operations. Commander Trell's 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he rushed to the monitoring station. His scaled skin reflected the flashing red emergency lights. "Report," he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension filling the command center. Officer Mick's fingers moved quickly across the control panel. "Unknown vessel detected entering Sector 7. Sir. Moving at sublight speed." Trell leaned forward, studying the blinking dot on the screen. "Identification." A pause. Mick's antenna twitched nervously. "Sir, the computer confirms it's human in origin." The room fell silent. Several officers stopped their work and turned to look at the main screen. Trell felt a cold sensation run down his spine ridges. "Human. Are you certain?" he asked, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Yes, Commander. The energy signature matches the propulsion systems. It's a warship class, specifically." Trell closed his upper eyes, memories flooding back from his early days in the Galactic Union forces. The last time humans had ventured this far into their space was during the Great Conflict, over 30 cycles ago. The stories of human warfare tactics still served as warning lessons in military training. "Alert all stations," Trell commanded. "Initiate Protocol 17. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, though Trell could sense their fear. Protocol 17 hadn't been used in decades. It was specifically designed for contact with potentially hostile advanced species. Trell walked to the window port, staring out at the darkness of space. The stars looked peaceful, giving no hint of the danger approaching. Humans were unpredictable, their short lives burning with an intensity that made them reckless and brave in equal measure. "Sir," called Officer Wren from the communication station, "the Union Council is requesting immediate updates. They want to know your planned response." Of course they did. The politicians sitting safely on the homeworld always wanted quick answers to complex problems. "Tell them we're tracking the vessel and will report once we have more information," Trell replied. On the main screen, the computer displayed an image of the human ship. It was smaller than Trell remembered their warships to be, but still dangerous. The sleek dark hull was marked with symbols in the human language. Even damaged as it appeared to be, it radiated power. "Sir," Mick called out, "the vessel's movement pattern is irregular. It appears to be damaged." Trell moved closer to the screen. The ship was indeed moving strangely, listing to one side as it traveled. "Could be a trick," warned Security Chief Fox, who had entered the command center silently. "Humans are known for deception tactics." Trell nodded. "Maintain distance but continue tracking. Power up defensive shields but take no aggressive action." He turned to face his crew. "Remember, we represent the Galactic Union. We will proceed with caution but not hostility." The crew returned to their stations, the tension in the room thick enough to touch. Trell remembered the stories his mentor had told him, of human ships appearing damaged only to suddenly attack when rescue vessels approached. The next hour passed in tense silence as they monitored the approaching vessel. Its erratic course continued, sometimes slowing, sometimes drifting off course before corrections were made. "Sir," called Mick suddenly, "the human ship is transmitting a signal." Trell straightened his uniform. On screen, the image flickered and then appeared. A human face, male by their standards, with light skin marked by burns and what appeared to be blood. The background showed flickering lights and smoke. "This is Captain Miller of United Earth Ship Defiant," the human said, his voice breaking with static. "We have critical system failures. Requesting assistance. And warning, you are all in terrible danger." Commander Trell stared at the human's face on the screen. The command center remained silent, everyone watching the injured Captain Miller with a mix of fear and curiosity. "This channel is secure," Trell said finally. "Explain your presence in this sector, human. This area is restricted to your kind." The human captain coughed, wiping blood from his forehead. "We know the restrictions. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." The transmission crackled with static. Our engines are failing. We took heavy damage. Officer Mick leaned close to Trell, keeping his voice low. Long-range scanners show something following the human ship's path, sir. Still too distant to identify. Trell's skin changed color slightly, a sign of his growing concern. He turned back to the screen. Captain Miller, our scans confirm your ship is damaged, but they also show something following you. Care to explain? The human's eyes widened slightly. Then they're closer than we thought. Commander, I need to speak with you privately. What I have to share concerns the safety of this entire sector. Security Chief Vox stepped forward. It's a trap, Commander. Humans are known for their deception, and you are known for your prejudice. Vox, Trell replied quietly. He considered his options. Union regulations were clear about human vessels, but something in the captain's desperate expression seemed genuine. Captain Miller, I will allow your ship to approach our station, but you will stop at the outer marker and allow our security team to board for inspection. Trell raised a hand to silence Vox's protest. Those are my terms. Miller nodded. Understood. Thank you, Commander. The transmission ended. The command center erupted in hushed arguments. Trell turned to his senior staff. I know the risks. I also know that humans, for all their faults, are not reckless without reason. If they ventured into restricted space, injured and being pursued, we should learn why. The Council will not approve, Wren warned. Then we won't tell them until we have more information, Trell replied. He turned to Vox. Prepare a security team. Full weapons, but defensive posture only. 2 hours later, Trell waited in the docking bay as the small shuttle from the human warship approached. The Defiant itself remained at the outer marker, its damaged hull now clearly visible through the station's telescopes. The shuttle landed smoothly despite its battle scars. The door opened with a hiss, and Captain Miller stepped out, followed by 2 crew members. All 3 looked exhausted and injured. Miller walked with a noticeable limp. Commander Trell, Miller said, extending his hand in the human greeting custom. Thank you for taking this risk. Trell hesitated before touching the human's hand briefly. Our medics can treat your injuries, then we talk. Miller shook his head. No time. What I need to show you first is in here. He patted a metal case one of his crew carried. In the station's secure conference room, Miller opened the case. Inside was a black metal box with blinking lights. This is our ship's data recorder, what we call a black box. I'm familiar with the concept, Trell said. Miller activated the device. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing star charts and movement patterns. 3 weeks ago, we were patrolling the edge of human space when we detected unusual activity. We investigated and found this. The display changed to show a massive swarm of objects moving in perfect coordination. We call them the Devourers, Miller said quietly. They consume everything in their path. Planets, ships, stations. They've been at the edges of human space for years. We've been fighting them secretly, keeping them contained. Trell's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. Why haven't you informed the Galactic Union? Miller's face hardened. Would you have believed us? After the war. He pointed to the display. But none of that matters now. They've broken through our defense line, and they're heading directly for this sector. Trell leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The swarm of Devourer ships moved like a single organism, destroying everything in their path. These recordings, Trell said, his voice low. They could be fabricated. Miller laughed without humor. Why would we fake this? Why risk coming to a restricted sector in a damaged ship? He pointed to the burns on his face. These aren't makeup, Commander. Officer Mick entered the conference room, his antenna twitching with anxiety. Commander, the scout ship has returned from the edge of the sector. They've sent their findings. Trell activated the main screen. The images confirmed everything Miller had shown them. A massive fleet of biomechanical ships, moving in perfect harmony, consuming debris and smaller vessels they encountered. By the ancients, whispered Trell. He turned to Miller. How long have humans been fighting these devourers? 8 years, Miller said, his eyes distant with memories. They appeared at the furthest human colony. We lost 30,000 people before we even understood what we were facing. Vox, who had been silently watching from the corner, finally spoke. If this threat is real, why did your people keep it secret from the Galactic Union? We could have helped. Miller's jaw tightened. After the war, would you have believed us? Or would you have thought it was a trick to get your forces near our borders? He looked directly at Vox. Your people still call us the unpredictable ones. Your history books teach that we started the conflict. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. The great conflict had ended 30 years ago, but the mistrust remained on both sides. It doesn't matter now, Trell said firmly. If these devourers are real and headed for this sector, we need to prepare. He turned to Mick. Send an emergency broadcast to Union Command. Include the scout ship's findings. Miller nodded in approval. We should evacuate the station. The Defiant can take some of your people. Evacuate. Vox sounded shocked. This is a Union outpost. We don't abandon our posts. Your station isn't built for combat, Miller pointed out. The devourers will tear through your defenses in minutes. Threll studied the station schematics on a nearby screen. Perhaps, but this station has something valuable. An early warning system for the core worlds. He looked at Miller. If we abandon this position, the devourers will reach populated systems without warning. Understanding dawned on Miller's face. You're considering making a stand here. It would buy time for the Union to prepare, Trell confirmed. One of Miller's crew members, a woman with short dark hair, spoke up. Sir, may I speak freely? Miller nodded, and she continued, addressing Trell. Our ship's weapons are still operational. If we combine our defensive capabilities with your stations, we might hold them off longer. Vox scoffed. Combine our systems. Our technology isn't compatible with human systems. We can make it work, the woman said confidently. I'm Engineer Tom. I've studied Union Tech. With help from your engineers, we could integrate our systems. Trell considered this, a human-alien defense network. Unprecedented. So was our war, Miller said quietly. Maybe it's time to make history for better reasons. Before Trell could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Mick rushed to a console. Commander. The scout ship's final transmission included time calculations based on the devourer's speed. His voice faltered. They'll reach us in hours, not days as we first estimated. Miller and Trell exchanged a look of shared understanding. Whatever their people's history, survival now depended on working together. Well, Commander, Miller said, extending his hand again. It seems we don't have time for debate. Trell took the human's hand firmly. Indeed, Captain. Let's get to work. He turned to his officers, battle stations, and prepared to integrate the human weapon systems. He looked back at Miller. It appears our peoples will write a new chapter of history today, if we survive to record it. The station hummed with urgent activity. Alien and human technicians worked side by side, their past differences set aside in the face of approaching doom. Engineer Tom stood before a tangle of wires and circuits, sweat beading on her forehead as she worked to connect the Defiant's weapon systems to the station's power grid. Hand me that connector, she said to the alien technician beside her. Vox passed her the tool, his eyes never leaving her hands as she worked. You know our systems well for a human, he observed. Tom smiled grimly. I studied alien tech during the peace talks. Some of us believed cooperation was possible. She connected 2 cables, resulting in a shower of sparks. There, power flow established. On the command deck, Captain Miller and Commander Trell reviewed battle strategies. The holographic display showed the station at the center, surrounded by projected devourer attack patterns. They'll come in waves, Miller explained, moving his hand through the hologram. First, they're scout ships, testing our defenses. then the destroyers, and finally the mothership. Trell studied the simulation with his 4 eyes. Your people have fought them before. What works best against them? Concentrated energy weapons at these points. Miller highlighted sections on the Devourer ship models. They have a hive mind. Disrupt their communication nodes, and they become disorganized. Mick entered the command center. His steps hurried. Commander, Engineer Tom reports the weapons integration is complete. The human ship's targeting systems are now linked to our defense grid. Good. Trell turned to the communication station. Any response from Union Command? Yes, sir. They acknowledge our warning and are dispatching a battle fleet. Estimated arrival time: 26 hours. Miller and Trell exchanged glances. Both knew what that meant. They would face the Devourers alone. We need to hold for 26 hours, Trell said simply. Miller nodded. We've faced worse odds. Have you? Trell asked. The human captain's eyes grew distant. The Battle of Proxima. 3 human ships against a Devourer attack force. We held for 38 hours. His voice lowered. I was the only survivor. A silence fell between them, broken by the station's alarm. Contact, called out an officer. Multiple objects approaching at high speed. The main screen showed dozens of small ships, their organic mechanical design unlike anything in the Union fleet. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish. First wave, Miller said, his voice steady. Scout ships. Trell moved to the center of the command deck. Activate all defenses. Target the lead vessels first. The station's newly integrated weapons powered up, human and alien technology working in harmony for the first time. Beams of energy shot out, striking the approaching Devourer scouts. 3 exploded immediately. It's working, Mick exclaimed. But the celebration was short-lived. The remaining scouts adjusted their approach, moving in an erratic pattern that made targeting difficult. They fired back, their weapons striking the station's shields. Shield capacity at 87%, reported an officer. More scouts appeared, replacing those destroyed. They swarmed around the station like angry insects, probing for weaknesses. They're learning our defense pattern, Miller observed. We need to be unpredictable. In the engineering section, Tom felt the station shake as another blast hit. She turned to Vox. The power coupling is overheating. We need to reroute through the secondary systems. Vox shook his head. The secondary systems can't handle that much power. They'll burn out. Then we'll have to make them stronger, Tom replied, already pulling apart a control panel. On Earth, we have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. On the command deck, Trell watched as more Devourer ships appeared on the long-range scanners. There are so many of them. Miller stepped beside him. Yes, but they don't have what we have. What's that? Trell asked. The human smiled grimly. Something worth fighting for. And the stubborn refusal to die when we're supposed to. As if to emphasize his point, the station's weapons fired again, destroying 5 more Devourer scouts in a brilliant flash of light. 6 hours into the battle, the station's shield generators strained under constant attack. The Devourer scouts had given way to larger vessels, their weapons far more powerful. Each impact made the lights flicker throughout the station. Shield capacity at 32%, reported Mick, his voice tight with exhaustion. Hull breaches on levels 5 and 8. Trell surveyed the damage reports flooding his console. Around him, his crew worked tirelessly, some treating injuries while continuing their duties. The command center bore the marks of battle, burned panels, exposed wiring, and the acrid smell of overheated systems. Repair teams to level 5, he ordered. Seal those breaches. Captain Miller studied the tactical display, his face grim beneath the smeared blood and soot. He hadn't slept since the battle began. The destroyers are forming a new attack pattern. They're trying to concentrate fire on the eastern shield quadrant. Divert power to strengthen that section, Trell commanded. An explosion rocked the station. throwing several crew members to the floor. Alarms blared as smoke filled the air. "Direct hit," shouted an officer. "Eastern shield generator is offline." Miller grabbed a communication panel. "Tom, we need that shield back up now." In the engineering section, Tom and Vox crawled through a narrow maintenance tunnel, the heat nearly unbearable as systems overloaded around them. "We're almost to the generator control hub," Tom shouted over the noise of failing equipment. "But I don't think we can repair it. The damage is too severe." Vox's scaled skin had taken on a pale hue, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Without that shield, the station's eastern quarter will be exposed. They'll tear through us in minutes." Tom paused, looking at the tangle of alien technology before her. "What if we don't repair it? What if we modify it instead?" "Modify? How?" "On the Defiant, we developed a pulse shield. It doesn't stay up constantly, but pulses on and off rapidly. Uses less power but still disrupts enemy targeting." Vox's eyes widened. "That's unorthodox. Our engineers would never consider such a design." "That's why the Devourers are adapting to your defenses," Tom replied, already pulling components from her tool belt. "You're too predictable. We need to think outside standard protocols." On the command deck, another hit rocked the station. A support beam crashed down, narrowly missing Trell. "Eastern quarter completely exposed," Mick reported, his antenna drooping with despair. "Devourer boarding craft detected. They're coming in." Miller pulled a weapon from his belt. "Security teams to the eastern quarter. We'll fight them deck by deck if we have to." "Sir," called out a young officer. "Message from Engineer Tom. She says to brace for power fluctuation." The lights dimmed across the station, then went out completely. For a terrifying moment, darkness and silence reigned. Then, with a surge, the power returned, but different. The shield displays showed an unusual pattern, pulsing rapidly on and off. "What is this?" Trell asked, bewildered. The tactical display showed Devourer weapons firing at the station's eastern quarter, but most shots missed, confused by the rapidly pulsing shield. Miller laughed, a sound of genuine relief. "She did it. It's a pulse shield, human technology. The Devourers can't lock onto it." "Incoming transmission from engineering," called Mick. Tom's voice came through, breathless and triumphant. "Commander, Captain, we've reconfigured the shield. It won't hold forever, but it should buy us some time." Vox's voice followed. "I must admit, Commander, human ingenuity is impressive." The moment of victory was short-lived. The main screen flickered, showing a massive object emerging from the darkness of space, at least 10 times larger than any ship they'd seen so far. Its surface crawled with smaller vessels, like parasites on a giant host. "What is that?" whispered Trell. Miller's face paled. "The mothership. We've never been able to destroy one." As they watched, the mothership opened like a blooming flower, revealing a glowing core that pulsed with terrible energy. "It's charging its main weapon," Miller said quietly. "When it fires, nothing survives." Trell turned to the human captain, seeing the same resolve he felt. "Then we must strike first." The command center fell silent as all eyes turned to the massive Devourer mothership on the screen. Its core pulsed brighter with each moment, building power for a devastating attack. "Can we evacuate?" Trell asked, though he already knew the answer. Miller shook his head. "Not enough time. That weapon will fire in minutes." Mick worked frantically at his console. "Our weapons can't penetrate its outer shell. We've tried everything." "Not everything," Miller said quietly. He turned to Trell, his face showing a calm that seemed out of place in their desperate situation. "The Defiant's reactor core. If we overload it and detonate it inside the mothership." Trell understood immediately. "A suicide mission." "I'll take what's left of my shuttle," Miller continued. "The Defiant's automated systems can be programmed to follow me in. Once inside the mothership, I trigger the overload." "Captain." "No," Tom had entered the command center, her face streaked with grease and sweat. There has to be another way. Miller looked at his engineer with sad determination. There isn't, Tom. You know that. Vox stepped forward. Even if you could get close enough, their defenses would destroy your shuttle before you reached the entry point. Then I'll need to be unpredictable, Miller replied with a grim smile. As the humans and aliens argued, Trell walked to a nearby console, studying the mothership's structure. Something about its design struck him as familiar. Captain, he said suddenly, I believe there's a way to improve your chances. He pointed to a section of the mothership. These patterns here, they're similar to ancient Union bioships. They would have a central nervous system running through these channels. Miller joined him at the console. A vulnerable point. Potentially. But we would need precise targeting data. And someone would need to fly directly through these defensive layers. Trell looked up. Your shuttle isn't fast enough or maneuverable enough. The Defiant is, Miller countered. But it's damaged, Tom reminded him. Its engines are damaged, Miller corrected. The navigation systems still work. If someone could pilot it remotely. Tom shook her head. Remote piloting won't work against their jamming fields. You'd need direct neural control. Neural control? Trell asked. Tom explained rapidly. On our newer ships, pilots can connect directly to the ship's systems through a neural interface. The Defiant has a prototype version, but it requires a human pilot. Not necessarily human, Miller said slowly, looking at Trell. Just compatible. A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone understood what he was suggesting. Our species' neural patterns are different, Trell said. I would not be compatible with your technology. Alone? No, Tom admitted. But with modifications, I could create a dual interface, both of you connected simultaneously. Miller nodded. Two minds, guiding the ship as one. Vox stepped forward. Commander, this is madness. Mixing your consciousness with the humans through untested technology. Do you have a better solution? Trell asked his security chief. The station rocked again as another wave of devourers attacked. The pulse shields flickered dangerously. We have 17 minutes before their main weapon fires, Mick reported. Trell looked at Miller, seeing the same determination reflected in the human's eyes. How long to set up this neural interface? 10 minutes, Tom answered. Maybe less if Vox helps me. Vox looked startled, but nodded reluctantly. Then we have no time to waste, Trell said. He turned to his crew. Continue defensive operations. Buy us every second you can. As Tom and Vox rushed to prepare the interface, Miller pulled Trell aside. You understand what this means? The human asked quietly. Even if we succeed, the neural shock from the explosion will likely kill us both. Trell's 4 eyes blinked solemnly. My people have a saying. One life freely given can save 1,000 reluctantly taken. Miller smiled slightly. On Earth, we say something similar. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. Are we friends, Captain Miller? Trell asked. The human extended his hand. I believe we are, Commander Trell. As they clasped hands, the mothership's core glowed brighter, counting down to destruction. In the heart of the damaged human warship, Captain Miller and Commander Trell lay side by side on makeshift beds. A web of glowing connections linked their bodies to a central console where Tom worked feverishly, making final adjustments. Neural synchronization at 70%, she reported, her fingers flying across the controls. Defiant systems are accepting the dual command structure. Vox monitored Trell's vital signs, concern evident in his usually stern features. Commander, your neural patterns are fluctuating. This is dangerous. Necessary danger, Trell replied, his voice already distant as his mind began to connect with the ship. Miller turned his head slightly to look at the alien commander. Focus on something concrete. A memory. It helps anchor your consciousness during the transition. Trell closed his 4 eyes, searching for a memory strong enough to serve as an anchor. He found himself remembering the day he received his command insignia, the pride in his parents' faces. Neural synchronization at 85%, Tom announced, bringing Defiant's weapons systems online. On the station, Mick coordinated the remaining defenses. The pulse shields flickered as Devourer ships hammered them relentlessly. The mothership's core now glowed with blinding intensity. 5 minutes until the main weapon fires, an officer reported, fear evident in his voice. In the Defiant, Miller and Trell began to experience something unprecedented, their minds flowing together, memories and thoughts intermingling as they both connected to the ship's systems. Miller saw Trell's homeworld through alien eyes, crystal spires rising toward triple moons. Trell experienced the vast oceans of Earth, feeling the humans' love for the blue planet. "I see everything," Trell whispered, overwhelmed by the flood of human experiences. "Focus," Miller reminded him, his own mind struggling with the alien perspectives flooding his consciousness. "The ship. Feel the ship." Gradually, they both became aware of the Defiant as an extension of themselves. Its systems became like limbs, its sensors their eyes, its engines their beating heart. "Neural synchronization complete," Tom announced. She leaned down between them, tears in her eyes. "The ship is yours. Good luck." The ship's engines roared to life, controlled by the merged consciousness of human and alien. The Defiant lifted smoothly from the station's docking bay, turning toward the massive Devourer mothership. On the command deck, the remaining crew watched the small warship accelerate toward almost certain destruction. "They've launched," Mick reported, his voice hushed with reverence. Inside the neural interface, Miller and Trell experienced flight as they never had before. They were the ship now, feeling the void of space around them, sensing the enemy vessels that moved to intercept. "There," Miller's consciousness indicated, highlighting the weak point Trell had identified. "I see it," Trell's mind responded, "but the defenses are thick." Together then, Miller thought. Unpredictable movements. Human instinct, alien precision. The Defiant danced through space, moving in patterns no single species would have conceived. It rolled and twisted, evading Devourer fire with impossible grace. Where human instinct suggested risk, alien calculation provided exactness. Where alien caution would have hesitated, human boldness pressed forward. On the station, the crew watched in awe as the small warship penetrated deeper into the Devourer formation than should have been possible. "They're approaching the mothership's outer shell," Vox reported, his voice filled with wonder. "They might actually make it." Inside the neural interface, Miller and Trell felt the reactor's power building toward overload. Their shared consciousness expanded in these final moments, each experiencing the other's life in flashes of insight and understanding. "The war," Trell's mind whispered. "I see now. It was based on a misunderstanding." "Yes," Miller's consciousness replied. "So much loss for nothing." "Not nothing," Trell thought as they guided the ship toward the mothership's vulnerable center. "It brought us here, to save both our peoples." The Defiant broke through the final defensive layer. The mothership's core lay exposed before them, pulsing with deadly energy. Their merged consciousness initiated the reactor overload sequence. In their last moments, their minds touched something greater, a perfect understanding between species, a bridge across the gulf of difference. It was worth it, they thought together as the Defiant's reactor reached critical mass. In the silence of space, the explosion bloomed like a newborn star,